when I was 20 years old, I would have assumed like, well, either I write a novel or I go get a day job. Like I never would have imagined I could have created a blogging platform that I could monetize like I have.
Ian, so I'm looking for ways to improve the audio quality of the show. What do you think about auto-tune?
I think you might be on to something. Welcome to the Tropical MBA Podcast.
Boss man, looking good. You got a nice pair of shorts on there.
Yeah, getting kitted up here in Saigon. It's real easy to get nice clothes, very expensive. Actually, I got a couple calls here right after we record the podcast, so I want to make sure I look good on the calls.
I always get nervous when the video Skype comes through. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? All right, today we are talking about passion in business. It's like this kind of thing in the blogosphere, right? Can we chase butterflies? Is that good enough? Is the money going to follow? Mark Manson called in 2 weeks ago to talk about the amazing things he's doing. He's got a talk called Passion is Practical. He talks about walking away from big money, going over to little money, and ending up with bigger money. So we got to figure out how this stuff goes down and how we can apply it in what we're doing. One of the things that really stuck in my head since you gave the passion speech at Berlin, I think I was surprised at how compelling I found it, because I tend to be this guy who is really worried about people who say, follow your passion, right? Because there's a lot of this sort of puffery online, the glad-hander, success blogger type crowd. And then you come along and lay out a really compelling case. How you started that was you told a story of a childhood friend. So do you mind telling the story of the guitar player?
Yeah, sure. The story I actually started my talk with was that when I was a teenager, I had this idea that I wanted to be this like big badass rock guitar player, and I got pretty good. I spent a lot of time practicing. All through high school, all my free time was spent practicing and jamming and everything. And I actually went to music school. And music school, it was kind of the first time in my life that I was really drilled and challenged really hard in terms of music and like my musical capabilities, and I was really pushed way outside of my comfort zone, and it just it demoralized me, and I got very burnt out. I didn't practice, and I just got so sick of my guitar and having to play all the time. And there was a kid in my program. He was the best guy. He was basically the best guy in the program. I had dinner with him one night or something, and I was just kind of complaining to him about everything. I'm like, I'm so sick of my guitar. I don't want to play anymore. I'm sick of all this music. Like, my teacher's such an asshole. And he just kind of sat there looking at me, and I was like, so what's your practice regimen like? Like, how do you work up the motivation to keep practicing every day? And he just kind of looked at me like, well, I don't know. I just kind of do it. And I said, well, what's your work ethic like? Like, how'd you develop like how do you organize the things that you practice and you work on? He's like, well, I just, my teacher gives me some things and then I do it. And all of his answers were basically just kind of like, I don't know, I just do it. And that was the moment I realized that I probably shouldn't be a guitarist, at least on a professional level.
Let me interrupt this for a hot second, because a lot of people have found ourselves in our businesses in your position.
Right.
We're 6 months into it, and Seth Godin says, you got to power through the dip. You got to get through that part where you don't feel like practicing and you just got to practice anyway. So what do you think about that? I mean, how do you jibe these two separate perspectives?
I mean, that's kind of actually where the passion comes from, because the only way you can stay motivated through that dip is if you actually believe in what you're doing. There needs to be some sort of deeper meaning behind what you're doing other than I want to make a bunch of quick bucks. Because if your only motivation is I want to make a bunch of quick bucks, then when you hit the speed bumps, you're going to lose motivation, and you're going to struggle with your work ethic a lot. So for me, that's exactly where it comes in.
So you laid out a story of the two separate businesses. You sort of took this lesson. I'm assuming you weren't thinking of this at the time, but you sort of grafted this lesson of the guitar passion onto a business project that you ended up abandoning. Could you sort of lay that out for us?
Early on, when I was still building up my own businesses, I used to do a bit of freelance work, and I landed a great gig handling the marketing for an online car parts store. And I mean, it was really kind of like the dream situation. I mean, these guys, they had a great, unique product that nobody else on the market had. There was high demand for it. They were selling tons of it on eBay. I mean, the guy was already making six figures on eBay, and he didn't even have his own website. And so it was walking into a gold mine for me to come in and say, well, hey, I'll set up your website, I'll set up your marketing, shopping cart, everything, and start cutting me in on the profits. And it was great, actually. Within the first 3 months, I think I made like 3 times as much money with that as I did from my own businesses. But the problem is I don't know anything about cars. I don't care about cars. I don't know anything about car parts. The guys who owned the business were older, like 50-something, 60-year-old guys. And so I was having to like argue with them. I kept wanting to implement different marketing ideas, and I'd have to argue with them, because they were stuck back in like 1975. And it was just a really, really unenjoyable experience. And so I had my own business that, was making a little bit of money, but I wasn't killing it or anything. And then I had these guys that I was, if I stuck with them, I would have been making 6 figures easily. But it was just a total drag. And I remember I got about 3 or 4 months into it, and that juxtaposition between those two things, it's like, okay, would you rather do something you really enjoy and make a little bit of money, or do something that you absolutely loathe and make 4 times as much money? And like having both of those options in front of me, it was such a no-brainer for me. So yeah, I dropped them.
I guess the interesting thing about your story is that your business blew up because you focused on what you were passionate about.
Yes.
But I guess the question is can these be expected results? Part of it is you have to have that fundamental sort of integrity at the beginning where you were like, look, it doesn't matter to me.
Right.
I'd rather suffer the fate of being a quarter as wealthy, but doing something I care about. People have such a hard time making that move. Intuitively, it makes sense to me. Why do people have such a hard time with this?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of fear involved. And I have to admit, it terrified me when I did it. Like, to suddenly, I remember looking at my accounts, and it was like December's income was like 15 grand and January's income was like 3 grand. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing? And that's terrifying. That's like, because you don't know if you're ever going to get back there. You don't know if that was your one shot and you lost it.
Right. And it wasn't like you were leaving to go be an investment banker. You were leaving to go be a personal development blogger. Not exactly. I mean, what in your mind were you just like, look, like I'm going to be, just pumping out these articles that I really love every day and come what may be? Or did you think, you know what, I can really turn this into something?
By that point, I mean, I had been doing the personal development and dating stuff for 3.5 years by that point. And so I actually that was kind of the other thing with it too, is that I made enough money. I was living in Thailand at the time, which, as you know, helps. And I had made enough money from those like 4 months with the car guys, that I was like, okay, I've got enough money in the bank that I could last in Asia for probably 1.5 to 2 years. I'm already making some money in the personal development world. I know, like, I've got some ideas. I know I can do some cool things that other people aren't doing. Doing the car part thing is kind of what gave me the ability to make that jump. It gave me that financial safety net.
Right. In some ways, it's like this ultimate wealth to be able to focus on your passion like that. I mean, right. It's like the ultimate luxury. So what I'm seeing a lot in our community is that, you might have sacrificed the income that could have bought you a Toyota 4Runner, but why would you ever choose a Toyota 4Runner when you could have 2 years of time to build an asset that you love, or right, that you feel like the world needs to see? Exactly.
And actually, I saw. I don't know if you meant to say this. I wish I could remember the blogger who said this, but it's a really cool phrase. Somebody wrote that meaning is the new luxury for our generation. So it's like, a generation ago, it used to be a yacht and a mansion and all this stuff. Like our generation, it's meaning. It's having something that we care about.
what do you say to the people that are having trouble finding things that they're passionate about? Like there's this whole group of people that they love the idea of living the entrepreneurial lifestyle, the rockstar lifestyle, yet it's just nothing really seems good enough for them. Do you have any kind of advice for them, or is it just buck up and work for an auto parts e-commerce store until you figure something out?
The first thing.
Well, here's another thing. What if what you're excited about just doesn't match up with money?
Well, in a lot of cases, it does. Like that's where the whole entrepreneurial part comes in, right? So, like, let's say I when I was 20 years old, I knew I was passionate about writing. When I was 20 years old, I would have assumed like, well, I write a novel or I go get a day job. Like I never would have imagined I could have created a blogging platform that I could monetize like I have. So that's kind of where a lot of the creativity comes in. But the first thing I want to say is that a lot of people, like when I talk about this stuff, and like you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, there's a lot of fluffy stuff out there, like do your passion and people will come and money will fall out of the sky and everything will be happy. Like I understand that people have to compromise. Like it takes time. This is an evolution that you work towards over the course of years. Like I did a lot of crap jobs and sold a bunch of stuff I didn't care about to get to the point where I am. So I think the idea of like an overnight passion success is kind of overblown. But in terms of like people who don't know what they care about or don't know what they're passionate about, the best answer I've heard to that question, actually an interview I think you posted recently, it's look at what you did when you were a kid. Look what you did naturally when you were a kid or a teenager without being like forced to do it or without trying to prove something to somebody. And it's funny because, when I was 12, 13 years old, I like taught myself HTML and I used to like write short stories for my friends and stuff like that. So
sometimes I think there's some complexity in here because you're a natural leader. And I think that there is an element to entrepreneurship where you need to lead people. Like you need to lead them to a purchase, you need to lead them through some information, you need to lead a team. And so sometimes that might be the rub. I don't know. There's so many places you can get snagged up with this stuff if you're not willing to put yourself out there.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, everything else that comes along with this, the willingness to take risks, the willingness to fail, try new things out. I mean, all that stuff applies. I mean, the reason this is such a hard question is because everybody's so unique. This is not a simple, like, these 4 copywriting tips will make you $8 gazillion. Like, this is like, everybody's wired differently. Everybody cares about something different. Everybody is like passionate and excited about doing different things. And so figuring out how that works into a business that can actually make money for them.
I think there's this attitude that develops, I think I resonate so deeply in your message is the idea that you would risk a lot of money in order to get 2 years back of time to build something. That to me, I would worry about the person who wouldn't want to do that. I would worry about their entrepreneurial prospects. So maybe that's an interesting litmus test.
The fundamental idea here is people are trying to monetize their passions. I love golf, right? What happens is the guy that loves golf, he ends up running a clubhouse, he ends up designing clubs, selling clubs, something like that, just trying to be affiliated with golf. And that's everything that takes him away from playing golf. So the way I see it, there's only a couple options. The strongest here, if you love golf, is to become a professional golf player. That way you get to play golf all the time.
There's like 3 of those guys ever.
Yeah, exactly. Everything else takes you away from playing golf. So why don't you design a business that allows you to play golf all the time?
Right. So here's the thing. You need to decide how the object of your passion, rather than the processes which you're passionate about. So for me, for example, a process that I'm passionate about is writing and communicating. I could run a radio show about other topics. So, I'm interested in a lot of stuff. We could do a podcast we could probably brainstorm 20 topics that me and you would both enjoy to do together. So that's the difference between the object and the process. So if you have an object that you're passionate about, like philosophy or men's health or golf, you need to figure out how well that plays with the enterprising spirit. So I like this idea of like the enterprising spirit is this modular thing. It's one thing to be a writer, but it's another thing to be an enterprising writer. An enterprising writer is one that seeks to find an audience, that seeks to provide value and then say, hey, do you want me to do that again? Could I please have $10? It's the difference between the small business musician who wants people to come to the club to watch them rock out versus the person who doesn't care and puts it on Facebook and hopes their friends will come.
And as Mark has demonstrated, there are so many ways to be a professional writer these days, which is very cool given the internet.
Absolutely awesome. And I think that that's an interesting thing to look at those processes. You know, we talked about finding your 5 hours, Ian. What is it that you could wake up every day and do for 5 hours? Great news is, if you have a job, you probably can still dig up 5 hours. So I think, is there something that you care about enough in your life that you could dig up 5 hours and participate in that every day? That's what it's going to take, right? All right, Ian, it's almost the end of the podcast, but before we go, we got to talk about some business stuff that you are excited about this week.
A lot to be excited about, buddy. Been reading...
Do tell.
Yeah. Been reading Patrick McKenzie's blog. Can't get enough of that guy. calzumius.com. Mm-hmm. He's got a really great video that he recorded at MicroConf last year. We are going to MicroConf Europe here in the next month. It's called Marketing Software for People Who Would Rather Be Building It, and it's just that. It's he just walks through how he marketed some of his new products.
So I want to point you guys to an article by Alex Shai called The Unbundling of Craigslist and Reddit. I haven't read Alex's blog previously, but he's got this brilliant little mock-up, and I just think it's an interesting way to think of business ideas. Basically what he does is he says, look what happened with Craigslist. It was this broad marketplace with an incredible critical mass. And then all of these startups came out of the verticals, the strong verticals that needed to be better served. So he points to things like Elance coming out of the jobs and Airbnb coming out of the community listings and StubHub and all this kind of stuff. So then what he says is like, all right, the same thing's happening with Reddit. He says Reddit is unbundling. Reddit is just it's massive.
Reddit, the front page of the internet. That's what all the kids are saying.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the page views are like. It's like almost like the numbers of galaxies. I mean, it's way up there. And he's basically saying, look, Reddit's starting to become unbundled too. He says, look at things like Quora, inbound.org, Photocracy, Hacker News, etc. Anyway, I think this is in line with TMBA philosophy, which is this idea of look what's already working out there, refine it, focus on strong verticals, figure out how you can uniquely distinguish yourself and serve those verticals better.
Last thing I want to talk about today, Dan, is Clarity. I think it's clarity.fm or something crazy like that. Anyways, it's a way to connect with people that are experts in industry. And so I went over to Clarity the other day because I had a couple questions about this new SaaS business that we're working on. Can't wait to talk about it. 2 weeks from now, we're going to be talking about how we're getting sued, making no money. Anyways, you were busy, so I had to go find some experts. Yeah. And so I signed up for a call, and I'm still waiting for that call. But yeah, it's pretty cool. You can reach out to people that I didn't even think I could talk to.
Yeah, go figure. Maybe we could have some of those people on the podcast someday, see how it works out. All right, we'd love to hear your thoughts about passion, any other resources, anybody who's got some cool ideas about this out in the blogosphere. Of course, we're always interested. This is tropicalmba.com/passion. We'll see you guys next Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for listening to the Tropical MBA Podcast. Again, we've got our complete audio archive available at tropicalmba.com. That's the cheapest way to fly business class on your next international flight. Also, every episode has complete notes with links. If you're interested in something we talked about, check out the site. And as always, we'll see you next Thursday morning.
Yeah, buddy.